one of the 28% of Americans who wait until April to file your returns for taxes? Are you? I used to be. I started doing it earlier, and I'll tell you what, it's a lot less headache. Now when April 15th comes and I'm down in Washington, D.C. doing my show, or hold their feet to the fire, I won't be thinking about my taxes that day. But a lot of people are right now. And a lot of people are in that some people enjoy doing it that way. They like the last minute kind of thing. I think it's kind of sick and perverted to want to do that. I say that with a tongue firmly implanted in cheek, to want to wait till the last minute, but it is what it is. Well, Jill Gonzalez understands that. She's a spokesperson for Wallethub, and she's here today to kind of help you with the countdown to tax day and some real tax day tips that might be helpful to you as you kind of get things together. Maybe you're even overwhelmed a bit. And Jill joins us here this morning on the Gary Sutton Show. Jill, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Great to have you in. And for the 28% who have waited now until April to file their returns, good luck, right?
That's right. I mean, the IRS actually estimates that the typical person spends 16 hours on their taxes. So good luck and get started.
And there are people that sit down for the whole day and do it. There's some people that walk away from it, come back to it over a period of time. I guess it just depends on what your individual thoughts are on that. But, you know, when you look at this, you guys have put together a great list of last-minute tax tips and reminders that hopefully will satisfy any questions that you have as you're starting to do this stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think the biggest one is, especially during this crunch time, watch out for scammers. So you hear people either on the radio, there's TV ads that really tout people trying to find hidden deductions for you to double your refund, things like that. And just remember, yes, it sounds a lot easier than sitting down and doing it yourself in the 12 days you have left. But if it sounds too good to be true, then it usually is.
I actually have someone who does my taxes, but I sit down with them and go over everything before, they go to it. And I make sure that things are fair and honest and all that stuff on it. So I have done that. I'm willing to pay someone to do that. And yet at the same time, it's someone I've trusted who has done a good job on it over the years.
Yeah, and that's still not out of the question. I think a lot of people don't realize how much free advice there is out there. There's a lot of volunteer tax prep groups organized as VITA. That's Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Site. So if you ever see that word, run to them, especially now. It's a lot of tax and accounting professionals, law students, business school students. They're trained. They volunteer at these sites, usually at nearby universities or public libraries. And I think now the lines are going to be a little bit longer, but there's nothing you can do about that. And I think for free advice and help, it's really worth it.
Yeah, you stand in line a little bit longer to get that free advice and help. One of the things that is really interesting to me is that the number one cause of tax fraud is identity theft, which obviously occurs when someone gets your individual taxpayer's personal information, like your Social Security number, your name and address, and all that kind of stuff. How do you stay away from doing that kind of thing? Because that certainly is something we don't go through a day without reading a story about tax fraud, or your information being stolen, identity theft.
Yeah, and the IRS actually estimates it's going to lose $26 billion as a result of fraudulent refunds during just the 5 years back from 2012 through next year, 2016.
Why?
Well,
that sounds like Lois Lerner's emails, for heaven's sakes. I'm just wondering what's going on here.
Yeah, so a lot of times this happens to people and they don't even know it, and they ignore the warning signs. So maybe a letter from the IRS about multiple returns, inconsistencies in your records, or even more relevant, I think, now, is when you make an e-file attempt and it gets bounced. Don't ignore that. If you try to file online and you are unable to do so, that could definitely be an indication that a fraudster has already filed a return under your name.
Wow. Yeah, so double check that right out of the gate. And now once you report identity theft to the IRS, the victim may get his or her refund, but not before going through a pretty lengthy process. Tell us about that.
Exactly. So I think that you can really get to the IRS, tell them about the fraudulence and whatnot, but it is going to take a long time for you to get your refund and then sort everything out. You're going to have to change a lot of how your private information is stored and make sure that it stays private. So it really turns into such a burden and a long process.
I saw it could take up to like 180 days to get this done.
Yeah, it could take up to 180 days. I wouldn't say it takes less than 60 days.
Wow.
I mean, this is the IRS. They're already going after people who haven't paid their taxes, who haven't even filed returns. And on top of that, they're going after this fraudulent activity and fraudulent accounts. It's sometimes, unfortunately, not at their priority.
Now, you also have some other things to think about, too. And, we all sit down and we get ready to go, and we got to get the paperwork together. And that's a big one. Get your paperwork together. Make sure you have it all. Make sure everything's there that represents the full composite of your year. And that sounds like something very simple, but you got to get organized coming out of the gate, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you take care of the big things, the little things will take care of themselves. Obviously, I hope that you know your Social Security number, but any W-2s, copy of your tax return from last year is always a good idea, just for comparison, and any bank account information that you need. And it's also a good idea to go back through your mail to make sure you didn't miss any forms, and to verify that expected documents didn't get sent to any old address, anything like that.
And you also have to report all the income that you've made during the course of the year. And people say, well, this was this. That's not a big deal. But if it becomes a big deal to the IRS, guess what? The big word audit starts to roll out there, doesn't it?
Yeah. So file any gift tax returns. If you made gifts that are in excess of the annual exclusion amount, so that's $14,000 per donee, anything like that, then file a gift tax return. And always, this goes without saying, I think, just assume you'll be audited. It's really never a good idea to cut corners.
Right.
Especially when it comes to your federal income tax returns, especially when it comes to the IRS.
No question about it. Now, you mentioned about getting free advice from people out there, and there's a lot of places. But again, you want to make sure that you go to some place that's trustworthy, some place that's known, some place that has some results that you can measure and check on, right?
Exactly. I mean, so many companies now claim that they have this ability to find hidden deductions. They negotiate with the IRS on your behalf. Don't look for that. These people will be honest. They won't really reach out to you. You're going to have to go seek out these VITA counselors that I was talking about earlier. So I think that's one thing to really stay clear of. And again, most of the time, especially this late in the game, the advice will be free.
A lot of people now like to file their taxes online. There's a lot of tax software out there. The word reliable comes to mind. Where do I find reliable tax software? Is there any rule of thumb?
Well, I think just make sure that it's coming from a great brand, brands like Intuit, if it's TurboTax, things like that. I mean, software programs are great. They instruct taxpayers. This is especially good for first-time taxpayers. How to fill out the forms, requesting relevant information, providing feedback that notifies you if you've, of course, made an error or not. So I think it's a great thing to do. But again, make sure you're getting this through reliable sources, reliable companies, and not kind of just taking what you can get.
One of the things that people don't think about maybe enough is the types of contributions that they can use around tax time to really make sure that they use their money wisely in terms of where it's going, and contributing to an IRA or to an HSA, a health savings account, really is a good way to go, right?
Yeah, so IRA contributions, they're up to $5,500 for a lot of people, $6,500 if you're 50 or older. They're both tax deductible, tax deferred. Of course, just make sure to send the contribution by April 15th and notify your deposit institution that you want it counted for 2014 tax purposes. Then the same goes with an HSA, and that's if you have a minimum deductible of $1,200 for individuals, $2,400 for families. That's a high deductible health plan. Then you can deduct HSA contributions up to $3,100 for individuals, $6,200 for families. So if you're overlooking that, that's a lot of money you could be saving.
Yeah, and you're always going to end up a little bit wealthier in a tax-deferred retirement account, and you always end up wealthier in a Roth account if you've invested a taxable amount. Now, you also talk about using your losses here. Tell me a little bit about that.
So a lot of people, again, overlook. If you are itemizing your deductions, which I would always recommend, I think it saves pretty much everyone more if you itemize. Don't forget to subtract your realized capital losses. And that includes gambling losses, a lot of people don't know. Mortgage interest, interest incurred on business loans or lines of credit, they're all deductible. So those are things that you need to really think about. And then for the future year, keep those on file. Again, keep your receipts, keep your records so you can deduct them quickly.
There are a lot of people who overpay on that, I know, and a lot of times I guess it just comes from the standpoint of convenience or laziness that you don't want to go in and really itemize those kind of things.
Yeah, don't sacrifice itemizing just for time's sake, which I know is tempting now. We are in crunch time. But really understand the difference between above-the-line deductions and below-the-line deductions. Above-the-line deductions are going to be a little bit more helpful. They reduce your taxable income.
One of the things... Yeah, go ahead.
That tax calculation base, instead of the below-the-line deductions where you can get a savings based on your tax rate.
One of the things that, we talk about are a gift tax return, filing a gift tax return. Tell me about that.
Yes, so the gift tax return I mentioned a little bit earlier, if you did have gifts in 2014 in excess of the annual amount, that's $14,000 per donee, then you need to file a gift tax return. So unlike the income tax, there's no extension to take advantage of for your annual inclusion. So again, if you have gifts over $14,000 per person, that happens a lot of times if there's a death in the family, a lot of wills include this, then you want to file a gift tax return.
When you look at, you mentioned earlier, assume that you're going to be audited. I want you to take me inside that a little bit more. What kinds of things attract the IRS attention that you found over the years?
Well, returns are usually selected for audit if something out of the ordinary is on the return.
For example?
So if a third-party income that's already been reported to the IRS isn't reflected on your return, but the payer reflected it, there's that doesn't add up there.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty common. You might not think that the payer has already disclosed it to the IRS, but if they have and you don't, you're not really getting away with anything. It's
exactly.
Actually the opposite. And of course, math errors are something that they always look for. If there's any missing forms, if there's deductions that are taken on the return that fall outside of normal ranges, then I think the IRS is going to take a little bit closer look at your return.
You probably laugh at this, Jill, but over the years I have heard so many different what do you want to say? Wives' tales, I guess I'll say, or lure. People say, if you put the sticker on there and send it back, if you that's fine. But if you write your name on it, they'll tend to audit you. And you hear all these. You probably heard some of the stupid things that people have said, and some of the lure over the years. Is there any of that that's true out there that you hear about?
Maybe 50 years ago, some of that was true, but now it's all done by artificial intelligence techniques. It's all computerized, and that is going to what really enables the IRS to recognize and detect patterns from these huge, large, complex data fields. Because over time, yes, the IRS's equipment has gotten better, but that's because a lot of these fraud and scams have also gotten a little bit more complicated as well.
There was some joke there, and I guess I couldn't pick it out, but artificial intelligence and the IRS together in the same sentence. Anyway, I'm sorry. I was being naughty. When we come back, I want you to hit us with some time management tips and also a little bit about what do you do if you can't pay? I mean, there are some people who are going to run into that, and how to make the most of your refund. Just some thoughts here. Jill Gonzalez is helping us out this morning. Hey, it's a countdown to tax day. I don't know if you noticed, but April 15th, it is coming very quickly, and Jill will be back with some more tax tips for us here on the Gary Sutton Show, courtesy of Wallethub on News Radio 910 WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. We're with Jill Gonzalez, a spokesperson for Wallethub. She's very popular this time of year and doing a wonderful job here this morning in a very nice way. A countdown to tax day, some tax day tips from Wallethub. Jill, time management tips, very quickly. It seems like make a plan would be the first thing on your mind, right?
Yeah, you want to make a plan, obviously. It's kind of a whirlwind right now. So make a plan and make sure that you do it step by step. Like you said earlier, you can walk away from it for a little. If you want to get it all done in one fell swoop, then go ahead. But either way, set some time management because, like I said earlier, the IRS thinks 16 hours on average is how long it takes to file some taxes.
And throwing should not be involved. Anything that involves the word throw, do not do it, even though you might be thinking about it. But, one of the things that could be a real preventative, proactive kind of thing that I think a lot of us run into sometimes. And I have a certain desk at home a desk drawer that every bit of tax information goes into it. So we're ready to go get it. That is my filing system. And then my wife and I sit down and we go over it, and then we go over it again with the person that's preparing it for us. But adopt a decent filing system where you know where everything is, because otherwise you're reaching for all kinds of piles of envelopes later on, and it just is a mess.
Yeah, so have something for each, have a little folder file for each type of document that you have. If it's an important receipt, a stock sale, a reimbursed doctor visit, just put them in the correct envelope. It's really not crazy. It's not hard, but it does take that little bit of effort. It's a couple minutes here and there when you get home from doing something rather than hours in April. Yeah,
exactly right. When you're sitting down and you see that just deluge of receipts in a box, you go, oh no. And that's a 5-hour evening right there. So the one question that's out there is, so what if you can't pay? Is there such a thing? And if so, what happens? I mean, the IRS is not known as the most warm and cuddly partner that you've ever had, right?
They're not, but honestly, they will work with you if you tell them ahead of time, hey, I can't pay. What are my options? Just keep this open dialogue with them, and they will be more than willing to work with you.
For example, can you give me an example of where they've worked with somebody and what they could work out with you?
Yes. So we already said file no matter what. The IRS assesses penalties in two ways. One, if you can't pay your taxes, might not be in or out of your control. Two, if you don't file. And that is something you have complete control over. So start with filing. And then if you need up to 30 days to pay, just wait for a bill from the IRS. You're going to be charged 3% interest on underpayments, a monthly late fee equal to about 0.5% of what you owe. But that's a pretty okay price if you really just need to buy 2 to 3 weeks of extra time.
And by the way, you can also file for an extension, which I've done several times, where you can, you have to put a file in there, but you can also file for an extension if you're not quite finished. Is that right?
Yeah, so if you need more than 30 days, probably less than 120 days, that's when you apply for that extension. There's no application fee. You do have to pay a late fee and 3% interest on your outstanding balance, but a lot of people don't realize that if you qualify for the IRS Fresh Start initiative, then those fees and interest are waived. So I think people don't even know that initiative exists. Look into it and see if you're one of those qualifying people.
I thought about something interesting, but I don't know if it would really work, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. It has a little tongue-in-cheek part to it. If I said to the IRS, listen, I was keeping all my records, and I got this friend Lois Lerner, and they were on her files, but they seem to have gotten lost. You think they'd buy that? I'm sorry, it was cheap.
What? I don't think they really care about the reasoning.
I know they don't. Yeah.
I think they want to see you file.
They
want to say, what do you need? Do you need an extension? Do you need an installment agreement? What do you need? The why, I think they care less about.
Yeah, I know. I was making a little joke at Lois's expense, and I'm not a big fan of the IRS. I don't think anybody is this time of year, really. But anyway, so at the end of all this, you want to make the most of your refund, right? What are some of the ways you can do that? Some people get the check back and haven't really thought about it, but it is something to think about a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah, so a lot of options actually have your tax refund come back on prepaid cards. So whether it comes from your tax preparer like you use, or some states, they offer to disperse tax refunds via this prepaid card. But they often charge a variety of small fees that really eat away at your money over time. So either get a check or a direct deposit, I think, is the easiest way to go.
Yeah, and then decide ahead of time. Sit down and talk about what you want to do with the money coming back, and make sure that you and your wife or your significant other are in agreement over that, because to not be in agreement is not a good thing.
Exactly. So I think the best two options out there are to, as soon as that refund comes in the door, pay off your debt. Turn it around, pay off some of your credit card debt, maybe a mortgage, or invest it. Putting your money into an IRA to lower next year's tax burden, or adding to a 529 savings plan to help your kid pay for college, diversifying your stock portfolio. I think those things, just investing that money right away, is really your best option.
Well, Jill, I really appreciate you joining us this morning. Some really good ideas there, some good common sense stuff, some other things that maybe goes a little bit deeper than that. But thank you so much as we count down to tax day. And I imagine you're going to be pretty busy between now and then yourself, right?
I am, so I'm happy that my taxes are all done. The IRS hasn't given me a call yet, so I think I'm good to go.
If everyone in the IRS and the tax groups were as nice as you, I think taxes would be a lot more fun. Jill, thanks so much for joining me today, and have a very pleasant Easter, okay?
You also. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Jill Gonzalez with us on the Gary Sutton Show, a spokesperson for Wallethub. The countdown to tax day and some tax day tips. Brian's going to put that up on Monday on our website at facebook.com/910WSBA. So if you want to refer back to that from time to time on some different things, feel free. You can also go to valuewalk.com, which is where I got some of the information this morning for what we talked about.